I found out a horrifying truth about my boss, and now he's trying to ruin my life. Derek Whitman, the CEO of Whitman Silicon Enterprises, was known for being ruthless in his business dealings. He single-handedly built the company and was often praised as a leading figure in the industry. In public, he was regarded as a successful self-made entrepreneur with a dazzling demeanor and uncanny business instincts. Having served as his executive assistant for the past 3 years, I had a first-hand experience of how his empire operated. I thought I understood him well, but I discovered I only knew the sides of Derek that he chose to show the world. You might never get to see it again, unless you subscribe to our channel. This is because once subscribed, you are always up to date with the most interesting stories waiting for you to watch and listen to them at your convenience. My position in the company was quite a lot of work. I organized his calendar, accompanied Derek to meetings, and had access to a number of his confidential transactions. I took some satisfaction in my organized approach to my work. Things got done, and they got done efficiently. I had always been careful not to pry too much into his affairs, understanding the line between professional boundaries and personal curiosity. It was a different story when I came across frighteningly suspicious documents that I shouldn't have had access to. That took place one late day while I was supposed to be waiting for Derek to get back to his office so I could present him some files he had to sign. Derek was not at his desk for a meeting, so I noticed his laptop was left unlocked. It was common for him to leave things open because he relied on me to guard sensitive materials. While going through the computer, I mistakenly clicked the folder that had the name Projects instead of closing it. I assumed it had something to do with work and required my attention, but the contents therein made me less than panic. In the folder, I uncovered documents detailing illegal offshore accounts, suspicious transactions, and what seemed to be an elaborate embezzlement scheme. My fingers began to shake as I opened each file. One by one, they revealed to me the depth of Derek's crime. There were files showing money being poured into shell companies, payments to ghosts, and records of bribes to government officials. The corruption was on a new level that shocked me. This wasn't just business malpractice. This was pure crime. I should have closed these files and convinced myself that I saw nothing. Derek was a powerful man. He had people in important places that he could corrupt or remove with ease. He was both feared and respected, and for good reason. But the information I had stumbled upon was something I could not ignore. Derek was neck-deep in serious crimes, and if I was correct, people were suffering. My conscience was screaming at me. Before exiting the folder, I made sure to transfer files onto the USB drive. A wave of jitters coursed through my body when I heard the slight click from my purse. Having the flash drive with me indicated that I did not want to get caught. But Derek had to be caught. The world was in dire need of knowing his true identity, and that had its consequences. After all, I was going up against one of the most powerful CEOs who would do anything to shield himself from threats. I was a bag of nerves for the next few days. It was impossible to relax, especially when Derek called me into his office. He could very easily come to the conclusion that I knew something that could put him in a precarious position. But the worst bit of it was that he chose to remain charming and ever so sophisticated. He was not the least bit concerned about the storm that was raging beneath his pristine veneer. Normalacy was my weapon of choice, which was surprisingly useful. While I completed my day-to-day work, the USB did serve as a reminder to just how perilous his secrets were. I kept everything to myself since I had no one to share it with. Who could be trusted with this information? The police? Or maybe the media? I had to be very careful. Derek had friends in high places and people who could take a fall for him, which makes it worse for me. I slowly started to gather pieces of more evidence that would help expose the full robberies of his networks. For now, I needed to pay more attention to his dealings. I had to figure out what were the next steps to take to help me understand the bigger picture in detail. My chance came during a company holiday. Derek was hosting a dinner where he was inviting some trusted aide of his. I was told to coordinate it, but under no circumstances was I supposed to attend. My job was to monitor everything, and if everything was all right, I was free to leave them to their discussion. But I took this as a great opportunity to gather more intel. I coordinated with the staff and asked to place a bug on the table so I could record the conversation. I hated the thought of doing so, but in my defense, I could argue that I needed to know what was being discussed behind the closed doors. I pressed play in my apartment that night, and the recording made every part of my body tremble. I heard Derek's voice loud and clear, alongside the voices of his associates. Their coded language made it a bit tricky to understand at first. However, the content of their conversation was very clear. They were speaking about illegal dealings, bribing officials, and using a number of aliases to hide themselves. This confirmed everything I had feared. Derek wasn't just deceitful, he was running an entire criminal organization. Even though I had every bit of information needed to approach the authorities, the consequences scared me. If Derek got a whiff of what I had done, he would come after me, and trust me, he had the adequate resources to make me completely vanish if it benefited him. In a nutshell, I felt completely trapped. sandwiched between the need to tell the truth and the fear of suffering the consequences. I chose to take a risk, contacting Laura, a journalist well known for her investigative skills on corruption within corporations. Following her career over the years has always left me awe-stricken due to her uncanny ability to uncover even the trickiest of truths. If anyone could assist me in taking down Derek, it was certainly her. We met at a cafe, where the crowd was large enough to allow us to avoid detection. Laura's reaction to the discovery left me unnerved. She was glued to her chair with the same wide-eyed attention that a toddler would give to a firework. There was a poignant sense of urgency as my heart raced, and I sort of placed the USB and recording in her hand. "This is wrong," she said after a moment of quiet. "You know what you're compromising, right?" "I know," I replied in a whisper. "But it has to happen." With great care, Laura assured me that she'd check the information and would be considerate in how she proceeded. I remember feeling an odd sensation of disquiet and relief as I made my way back to the apartment. The waiting was undeniably the worst part. Days felt like years and everyday life was unbearably tedious. But, with the help of work, I pretended, at least on the surface, and internally I was a mess. Then came the mornings when out of nowhere Derek sought me out in his office. He was relaxed as usual, and his expression felt like concrete. He was waiting for me to step in, and to break down the nerves, I closed the door behind me. While he hovered his hand over his desk, I felt my heart shoot straight to my throat. He started talking. "I see you have been loyal to this company for quite some time." His tone was calm and emotionless. "But there seems to be some odd behavioral patterns with you recently." I felt a shiver slither down my spine. He already knew. Somehow, he had figured out my plan already. "In my business," he interjected, "it is crucial to know who is close to you." He leaned forward. I was shocked when found my aide turned out to be a consultant that plays around me. He put a folder on the table in front of me, and I instantly knew without looking at it that it contained marks of my wrongdoing. My mind skidded. Had he really overheard my conversations with Laura? What if he had been tracking me the entire time? "Derek, I started talking, but he raised his hand to silence me. "You have made a terrible error," he said. His eyes were devoid of warmth. "But there is one thing that will make me overlook this." I waited for his ultimatum as I braced myself. "Effective immediately, you will resign from this company," he said. "Furthermore, do not disclose any of the information you have come across. If you do, I will personally dismantle your career, reputation, and life. Make no mistake, I possess unrivaled power to ensure I do so." A wave of nausea blindsided me. There was an exit on the table, but it came at a cost. Doing so would give him a chance to escape from bearing the consequences of his unlawful deeds while sacrificing the well-being of countless innocent people. Not to mention, I would be exposed to his wrath. Every shred of my being would be at stake. "Those are your instructions. Do you understand? If I, as your superior, deem them right, it means you can't argue my decisions. You will accept and comply," he ordered, rather final. Looking at him, the man who had been a god to me once, I realized how I had placed all my faith on a single individual. This newfound perspective gave birth to panic within. There was a trickling sensation that propelled me to take the exit. But what if I get consumed with guilt? I came this far. What's left is exposing him. So why am I holding myself back? "I will not sit by idlessly," I said, summoning courage as I clung to my resolve. Derek's face darkened for a moment, and I wondered if he was going to explode with rage. Fortunately, he just leaned back in his chair, a devious smile stretching across his face instead. "Very well," he said softly. "You've made your choice." The next few days had to be the worst of my life. Derek did not release his grip on me, and like he promised, he used every tool in his toolkit to destroy my life. Derek leveraged everything he could to damage my reputation, going as far using lawyers for crafted UK cease and desist letters. He claimed I was an irresponsible ex-employee who was attempting to destroy everything within the company. My reputation was dismantled in a matter of minutes. Friends I regarded as colleagues decided to bail on me simply because they didn't want to be targets of Derek's mess. The worst part was yet to come. One day, an abrupt knock on my door jolted me out of sleep. Cops, armed with a request, were waiting for me at the door. On barging into my apartment, they claimed to find evidence for embezzlement. In reality, evidence I knew had been planted. It was Derek who had set me up, doing a reverse frame which turned me from a victim into a criminal. Handcuffed and loaded into the police van, I repeated my innocent rhetoric over and over again. The accusations were no laughing matter. Embezzlement, fraud, and theft all rolled into one, each with its own heavy consequence. I was staring into prison time without blinking, and Derek was well aware of this fact. This was his method to ensure that I would be permanently silenced, keeping his skeletons in the closet for good. Sitting in the holding cell, I pondered about my life's direction. Even after trying to capture the real criminal, I now found myself in a crime jail, paying for someone else's sins. But then, an unexpected event unfolded. The journalist I had spoken to earlier, Laura, came to meet me. It seemed that she had been working off the record trying to look into Derek's connections and managed to find some other evidence which not only corroborated what I was saying but also showed that Derek was involved in more serious crimes than what I had originally suspected. "We have him," she said forcefully. "I've reached out to my contacts, and we are going to release the story. This will definitely change the narrative." This is how, with Laura's assistance, the narrative started emerging. She wrote an article revealing the details of Derek's criminal network, which was backed by further documents I provided, alongside the evidence that she had collected herself. It became a sensation on social media and so grabbed the attention of the people and the police. With the further scope of the investigation, more and more people linked to Derek began to cooperate in return for cash. The noose was tightening around him, and he was well aware of that. Derek attempted to fight back and ran a campaign to refute the story. However, all his efforts were futile. There was too much evidence against him, and the officials had no choice but to act. Soon, a warrant was placed for his arrest with charges of embezzlement, fraud, bribery, and multiple other accusations. Derek's empire soon became nothing, and he was instead a fugitive trying to escape his arrest as a CEO. Derek's empire soon crumbled and transformed him into a fugitive. On the other hand, the charges against me were unfairly dropped. The so-called evidence that was presented to the court was far too exaggerated and false to be believed. So, in reality, it was a feeble attempt made by a person who was guilty and tried to save himself. At the end, I was let go, but the trauma had already been experienced. Although I was legally vindicated, the betrayal from Derek left emotional scars that gnaws deep within me. In the end result, Whitman Silicon Enterprises became defunct, and the gap Derek's criminal records left will take forever to fill. The infamous Derek Whitman gave so much hope to his employees who revered him, but now live under a cloud of uncertainty due to the multi-billion-dollar scandal. He was captured as another state of which he was recently trying to claim. The trial and the events that followed was a nightmare for all the onlookers and uncovered the magnitude of atrocity committed by him. I had turned against him and spoken of the discoveries I made which he sought to threaten me to conceal. When I started narrating, I felt the combination of victory and horror. Victory, because I did not let myself be silenced by fear. Hong was found guilty on 11 counts and locked away to rot in prison for decades. His reputation was destroyed and his empire was brought crashing down. Her story is award-winning and thankfully, she has given her side about me, allowing me to come off not as a victim but as a whistleblower who was brave enough to tell the side of the story that needed to be told. Knowing that the world understands the type of man Derek is, does provide some closure. Unfortunately, it is an expensive form of closure. Rebuilding my life was a gradual process. I had lost my job, my career, and the trust of several individuals who had chosen to believe in Derek's lies. However, I managed to get assistance from some new allies who appreciated the stand I had taken. Once again, I managed to secure a new job, but this time in an entirely different field, away from the dirty corporate world. I was also able to relocate to a new city, granting me the chance to start fresh and get away from the shadow of Derek Whitman. Ultimately, I discovered that doing the right thing almost always has a cost. In the end, standing up against someone as powerful and corrupt as Derek Whitman meant risking everything. But I also had to remain true to my morals. Derek did his best to destroy me, but in the end, he used all his energy to bear his darkness and fall in the depths of self-isolation. I survived and came out on the other end with my integrity intact. I had emerged from the collision still alive, though with some damage. But these wounds were not entirely negative. They highlighted my resilience and the bravery I displayed in battling a monster that attempted to muffle me. I was not the same. I had changed from the person I once was. I was stronger and increasingly more intelligent when it came to understanding the world I lived in. Eventually, life returned to normal. I was optimistic in envisioning how my future would work out, knowing that I was able to make a difference during the most difficult times. Unlike before, I felt liberated from the shackles Derek had sought to place upon me. The world ahead was full of uncertainty and challenges, but it was a journey I was more than willing to partake in.